Welcome to Story Time with Sophie and Louie. We're going to read a little bit more of our book, Ramona the Pest. Yesterday when we left off, Ramona had gone to her room and slammed the door, and she started pounding her feet on her bedspread, but that wasn't good enough for her. She wanted to be wicked, really wicked, so she swung around and beat her heels on the wall, bang, bang, bang. And that noise ought to make everybody good and mad. Mean, 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 she yelled in time to her drumming heels. She wanted to make her whole family feel as angry as she felt. Mean, mean, mean. She was glad her heels left marks on the wallpaper. Glad, glad, glad. Mother, Ramona's kicking the wall, cried Tattletale Beezus, as if her mother did not know what Ramona was doing. It's my wall, too. Ramona didn't care if Beezus tattled. She wanted her to tattle. Ramona wanted the whole world to know she was so bad she kicked the wall and left heel marks on the wallpaper. Ramona, if you're going to do that, you'd better take off your shoes. Mrs. Quimby's voice from the living room was tired but calm. Ramona drummed harder to show everyone how bad she was. She would not take off her shoes. She was a terrible, wicked girl. Being such a bad, terrible, horrid, wicked girl made her feel good. She brought both heels against the wall at the same time. Thump, thump, thump. She was not the least bit sorry for what she was doing. She would never be sorry. Never, never, never. Ramona, Mr. Quimby's voice held a warning note. Do you want me to come in there? Ramona paused and considered. Did she want her father to come in? No, she did not. Her father, her mother, nobody could understand how hard it was to be a little sister. She drummed her heels a few more times to prove that her spirit was not broken. Then she lay on her bed and thought wild, fierce thoughts until her mother came and silently helped her undress and get into bed. When the light had been turned out, Ramona felt so limp and tired that she soon fell asleep. After all, she had no reason to try to stay awake because the tooth fairy was not going to come to her house that night. The next morning, Mrs. Quimby walked into the girls' room and said briskly to Ramona, "Which dress do you want to wear to school today?" The empty space in her mouth and the heel marks on the wall above her bed reminded Ramona of all that had happened the day before. "I'm not going to school," she said, and reached for her play clothes while Beezus put on a fresh school dress. A terrible day had begun. No one said much at breakfast. Howie, who had recovered from his cold, stopped for Ramona on his way to school and then went on without her. Ramona watched all the children in the neighborhood go to school, and when the street was quiet, she turned on the television set. Her mother turned it off, saying, "Little girls who don't go to school can't watch television." Ramona felt that her mother did not understand. She wanted to go to school. She wanted to go to school more than anything in the world, but she could not go back when her teacher didn't like her. Ramona got out her crayons and paper, which someone had put away for her, and settled down to draw. She drew a bird, a cat, and a ball in a row, and then with a red crayon she crossed out the cat because it did not begin with the same sound as bird and ball. Afterward, she covered a whole sheet of paper with cues, Ramona style, with ears and whiskers. Ramona's mother did not feel sorry for Ramona. She merely said, "Get your sweater, Ramona. I have to drive down to the shopping center." Ramona wished she had money from the tooth fairy to spend. There followed the most boring morning of Ramona's entire life. She trailed along after her mother in the shopping center while Mrs. Quimby bought socks for Beezus, some buttons and thread, pillowcases that were on sale, a new electric cord for the waffle iron, a package of paper for Ramona to draw on, and a pattern. Looking at patterns was the worst of all. Ramona's mother seemed to sit for hours looking at pictures of boring dresses. So that was Ramona's boring day. At the beginning of the shopping trip, Mrs. Quimby said, "Ramona, you mustn't put your hands on things in stores." Later, she said, "Ramona, please don't touch things." By the time they reached the pattern counter, she said, "Ramona, how many times do I have to tell you to keep your hands to yourself?" When Mrs. Quimby had finally selected a pattern and they were leaving the store, who should they run into but Mrs. Wisser, a neighbor. "Why, hello," exclaimed Mrs. Wisser, "and there's Ramona. I thought a big girl like you should be in kindergarten." Ramona had nothing to say. "How old are you, dear?" asked Mrs. Whistler. Ramona still had nothing to say to Mrs. Whistler, but she did hold up 5 fingers for her neighbor to count. "5!" exclaimed Mrs. Whistler. "What's the matter, dear? Has the cat got your tongue?" Now that's an old expression. Has the cat got your tongue? Meaning, why aren't you saying anything? Ramona stuck out her tongue just enough to show Mrs. Whistler that the cat had not got it. Mrs. Whistler gasped. "Ramona!" Mrs. Quimby was thoroughly exasperated. Remember, exasperated? Very upset about what Ramona did. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Whistler. Ramona seems to have forgotten her manners." After this apology, she said angrily, "Ramona Geraldine Quimby, don't you ever let me catch you doing such a thing again." "But Mama," protested Ramona as she was dragged toward the parking lot, "she asked me and I was just showing her." There was no use in finishing the sentence because Mrs. Quimby was not listening, and she probably would not have understood if she had listened. Mrs. Quimby and Ramona returned home in time to pass the morning kindergarten, straggling along the sidewalk with their seat work papers to show their mothers. Ramona got down on the floor of the car so she would not be seen. We're going to stop there, and we will read. We have 2 more days, Thursday and Friday. At the end of Friday, we will be done with Ramona the Pest. So I will finish part of it tomorrow, and we will finish up the whole book on Friday. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye-bye.